Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you this afternoon. Yet another one of our afternoon chats. I'm going to be away for a little bit this week, heading out of the country, but I want to get as many streams in before I go as I can. All good, folks, and I'll be back quick. It won't be a long trip. So, yeah, glad you're all here. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do this.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Good to engage with all of you. We're just having another afternoon conversation. Shout out to Lee Stranahan in the chat. Lee Stranahan is a great radio broadcaster, an anti-imperialist, longtime anti-war activist. We really appreciate Lee Stranahan, and I would encourage you to follow him on Twitter. He does great work. We've had many great conversations over the years. I see a super chat's already coming in, so I'm writing it down. This is from Gonzalo Battle Cossack, our friend in Argentina. He's asking about socialism compatible with mass consumerism. That's what he's asking about. So that's a good question to start out with. That'll be answered the way we do things. Let me pour my unnamed diet beverage as I explain the way these things work. You all didn't see that. We pretend we don't know what beverage that is, right? I'm pouring my unnamed diet beverage, my highly addictive, diet beverage manufactured in the United States by a major food and drink producing company. The way we do things here is we do the opening remarks, which is just me talking about what it is I want to talk to you about. Then from there, we do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who's on the other side of the camera. And then from there, after we've done the roll call, and before that, we've done the opening remarks, then after that, we then answer people's super chat questions or Rumble rant questions or Rockfin tip questions for the rest of the night. That's the way we do it here. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of our show, do what Battle Cossack just did. Send me a super chat or get on the Rumble and send me a Rumble rant, or get on the Rockfin and send me a Rockfin tip. I'm on 3 different platforms right now. Most people, I will say, watch this show live, but you are in the lucky 1 to 10% who watch it live, and most people, I should say, don't watch this live. They watch it afterwards. So use your power to make this conversation go however you want it to go. That is my advice to you. Use your power as somebody watching this in real time to direct the conversation the way you want it to go. Send me a super chat. Give me something to talk about in the second half of our program. That is my advice to you. Make this conversation about what you want it to be about, because you're here watching it live as it's happening, right? All the people who watch it afterwards, you are way ahead of them. You are way ahead of them because you're watching it live, and you can make it be whatever you want. And the live chat is a big part of this stream, right? If I was just if I just wanted to get my thoughts out there, I could film it and upload it. But I do it live because I'm keeping my eye on the chat. Jamie's here. It looks like Stalin is here. Mexican Cola is here. You know, Lee Stranahan is here. And because of that, I'm reacting to you. It's like a back and forth conversation. It's really, really beautiful what we do on here. So yeah, I would encourage you to keep that in mind. Ask some questions. Give me something to talk about in the second half of our program. And based on really quickly, before I jump into my opening remarks, I do want to remind you all that the Center for Political Innovation is having our national convention on December 2nd in Portland, Oregon. And we're in the process of nailing down our guests. It looks like the great Scott Ritter will be there. It looks like Garland Nixon will be there. Jyoti Brar from the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, looks like she is going to be there. It looks like Nick Brana of the People's Party is going to be there. It looks like the folk musician David Robics will be performing. It looks like we're going to have all kinds of great speakers and guests from the Center for Political Innovation. You don't want to miss it. You do not want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be awesome. So make your travel arrangements. Book your flight, your plane, your train, your automobile. Get yourself to Portland, Oregon for the national convention. The first time we've ever had a national convention. We've had conferences before, kind of last minute, events where we honor somebody or we have some speeches. This is the first time we've had a national convention, and we have been building it, and we're doing outreach around it, and it's going to be great. So we'd like to have you there. So just make a point of coming. It'll be good to see you there. Also, if you're able to help us cover the costs, that would be great. Right? If you go to the CPI website, we now have a banner for the convention. That's like the first thing that you'll see. But on top of that, if you would like to send us a contribution to help cover the costs, I will be honest, we could really use it, right? Support the convention. We could really use it. The convention's going to happen at this point, right? I mean, everything's paid for and reserved, but there's a couple things that are pretty tight squeezes. And, if we want to do everything exactly the way we want to do it, and we are, in addition to doing the conference, we're having a weekend workshop for new members the following weekend in Portland, Oregon. We are having an event the night before with the World Anti-Imperialist Platform and the Party of Communists, where Jyoti Brar, our honored guest from the UK, is speaking. We are having another event on December 3rd. We're doing a lot. It's a whole 10 days of activities, really, in Portland, Oregon. If you want to help it go smoothly, send us a contribution. That would be really, really appreciated. That would help us get everything in order for the convention. So a contribution, that would be really, really appreciated if you could do that. Also, if you are going, we would really like you to RSVP. Let us know that you're going to be there. The hall only holds 250 people, and I think we're going to have it. I think we're going to have that because we're busing people in from Seattle, because we're, busing people in from Northern California. I think we're going to fill it. So be sure to let us know that you're coming so that we know we're going to have enough space. So if you could just sign up on the Eventbrite, that's the best way to let us know that you are coming. It's free. It's a free event. You don't have to pay anything to come to register for the event. Donations are obviously appreciated, but they are optional. But we would like to know that you're coming so we can send you the location and any announcements related to the event. So if you're coming, please RSVP. Right? It's a very lovely, lovely venue we've gotten near Portland, Oregon, not in Portland proper, but in the area of Portland, Oregon. A beautiful, beautiful venue. It's going to be a really fancy and tremendous event, and we need you there. We need you there. We want you there, right? You are part of this community. You're watching these streams. You're engaging in this conversation that we're having. So we would really like it if you were to register. So go ahead and register. If you can donate. If you can register. Donations and registrations are always appreciated. They help us put on the event. And I just had to get that out of the way because we are scrambling to make sure we get everything in order for our convention. Our president, Elizabeth Young, is quite nervous about things, trying to get everything in order. We had a great planning meeting on Thursday, 23 people from different parts of the country, but most of them from Portland or Northern California or Seattle. And, we have got a good crew of people that are really dedicated to pulling off an epic anti-imperialist convention. This is going to be an all-day anti-imperialist mega rally in Portland, Oregon. We are going to fill up an auditorium. We are reaching out to the Russian Community Center. We are reaching out to the Party of Communists. We are reaching out to the California United Front. We are reaching out to people that have gone to rallies and called for an end to World War III, preventing World War III, the Palestinian community. I'm in the process of talking to the Palestinian community about having a Palestinian speaker to talk about what the Palestinians are up against and what has just happened there. We're all over this, and a lot of people have stepped up to the plate because they understand just how important this is. And shout out to all of them. Shout out to all of them. Some of them are not CPI members. Some of them are just friends that we have, people that are in other organizations that like the work that we're doing. They're stepping up to the plate to help make this convention happen. And we love those people and we appreciate it. And we are honored that they are helping us do it. And, there we go. See, Jamie was thinking she couldn't be there, but I think I can afford to get there. It's a total surprise. See that, Jamie, that is the hope, right? I mean, these things are happening, right? There is a way to make this happen, right? I've been telling people that, let me take my first drink of unnamed diet beverage before my ice melts here. Let me just take a sip. I've been telling people that lately, a lot of us, you're not the only one. You are not the only one. But lately, a lot of us have been feeling like we're swimming upstream. Outside yesterday, I was walking around my neighborhood. I'm thrilled too, Jamie. It'll be awesome to see you there. I was walking around my neighborhood yesterday. The wind was blowing. It was just blowing really hard. And I was walking against the rain. And I just pushing down the street. And I was thinking about how difficult, I got the wind, blowing in my face and all of this. But that's kind of how it's been for many of us the last couple months, right? Many of us have been feeling like the wind is blowing at us. The inflation is making everything cost more than you would believe. There are some of us that are struggling to find jobs. There are some of us that are struggling to get everything in order. And, many of us have been pushing against the wind or swimming upstream, as they say. And the thing to remember about swimming upstream is this. Number one, you don't drown swimming upstream unless you stop. No one ever drowned from swimming upstream. They drowned when they stopped swimming upstream. So as long as you are still swimming upstream, you're still going. You haven't drowned yet. So don't fall into the illusion that just because it's difficult, just because you're swimming upstream, that you've drowned, number one. Number two, important thing to be aware of is that if you swim upstream for a bit, you get that exercise, you get that conditioning. When you start swimming downstream again, when you're no longer swimming against the current, that strength that you built up by pushing against the grain, pushing uphill, that strength that you built up stays with you. And you are that much stronger when the odds are in your favor, and you can perform even better in better times. You have to learn to perform against all odds. You have to learn to perform in difficult circumstances so that when things are no longer difficult, you can do an epic job. And that's really important, right? And it has been an upstream year for us. But we have done miracles this year with the Center for Political Innovation. We launched the Summit Against Hypocrisy. It was a great conference in Washington, D.C., and it was pretty last minute. I mean, we barely had any time to plan it. But we had a conference in Washington, D.C., it was amazing. And before that, we did a reception after the Rage Against the War Machine rally, right? They had that Rage Against the War Machine rally. Well, we also, very last minute, organized a reception after the rally where Scott Ritter was given a platform. He was unable to speak at the actual rally. So we organized our own rally for Scott Ritter, and it was epic. It was absolutely epic. We did some amazing stuff this year, right? We then had an amazing weekend workshop in Missouri, in St. Louis, Missouri, near St. Louis, Missouri. We got a beautiful, beautiful lodge by a lake. And we had a good 40 people, I think. Maybe it was a little bit less than that, but I think if you counted everybody, it was about 40 people. And we had a 3-day weekend workshop, an intense, classes on Marxism, classes on socialism, classes on spirituality, fun activities, a lovely talent show. It was a great weekend that we had in Missouri. And then to top it all off, July 10th in New York City, we had an event in New York City, which, mind you, having an event in New York City is way harder than doing it anywhere else, because New York City, parking, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. It was on a weekday, forget about parking. The lodge, it was very hard to find a place. It was difficult to pull off the event. We had a small rally, just like a kind of a street speak out. And then we had an evening event that was addressed by all kinds of great people that spoke to our evening event. Chris O'Lully, Marnie Halassa. It was a great evening event. Jose Vega, who, the guy who's the great disruptor, who's been disrupting event. It was epic. We had guests from the Uhuru movement. We made then a beautiful film that Peter Coffin made of that event called Money and American Injustice, where we highlighted the Uhuru case and how important it is. We have moved mountains this year, right? And it has been difficult, and we've been swimming upstream the whole time, but it has been worth it. And we are going to end the year of 2023, the last month of the year. December is going to end with an epic anti-imperialist rally. And you're on the list. You're on the list. We are going to end the year of 2023 with an epic all-day anti-imperialist rally. And like I said, it's going to be like 10 days of activity in Portland, Oregon. You don't want to miss it. You really don't want to miss it. And we are so excited. So we just need you. If you're going, please register, right? Register for the event. If you're going, please just go ahead and register. That way we know you're coming, and we can make space for you. Register for the event. If you would like to send us a contribution to help us cover the costs, you can do that as well. A contribution would be appreciated. That'll help us put on the event as well. So I just wanted to get that out of there. Just let you all know what we're planning, what we have achieved. If you haven't had a chance, down below you can watch a documentary that Peter Coffin made about our March convention. Just a beautiful film he made. Just a beautiful, beautiful film he made about our March Summit Against Hypocrisy. You can go to the website, cpiusa.org, and you can look at the films section that we just updated and added to the website. We're doing really, really exciting stuff here. And the theme of our convention is Dare to Win, a World Beyond Imperialism, the National Convention of the Center for Political Innovation. It's going to be epic. We want you there. We want you to sign up. We want you to be there. So, I just can't pitch the convention enough. This is going to be the biggest event we've ever done. We have never had a convention that will be this big. 250 people in that auditorium, buses from the surrounding area, providing transportation. Yeah, it's going to be absolutely epic, so don't miss it. All right, that is the announcement I had to get out of the way. And, we're on the Rockfin right now. We're on the Rumble right now. And we're here on YouTube right now. And I'm taking the super chat questions as they come in. And you're on the list. Those will all be answered in the second half of our program. So there you go. I guess I'll just start with my opening remarks for now. Then I'll answer the questions people send in the second half. Folks, Folks, I have been to a bar mitzvah before. There was a friend of my wife's, a family she had worked with. They invited us to the bar mitzvah of their teenage son, and that was an experience. I'd never been to a bar mitzvah before. So I have been to a bar mitzvah, only one. But I have never been to a Jewish wedding. Just have never done it. There was a friend of mine who was Jewish, and he had a wedding, but it wasn't a traditional Jewish wedding. It was really an honor to go to his wedding, but he didn't do the traditional Jewish thing. I have never been to a traditional Jewish wedding. I have only seen them on TV. Right? In a lot of movies, you can watch traditional Jewish weddings. I have never been to one. But I do understand, based on what I have seen on television, again, I have never been to one, that there is a tradition at Jewish weddings that I've seen in many movies where the couple gets married, and I don't know if it's the groom or the rabbi or somebody, at the very moment that the couple gets married, they have a glass. I don't know. You've probably seen this in movies. They have a big glass, like a big, glass bottle or glass something. And at the very moment that the rabbi pronounces them man and wife, they're married, the rabbi or the husband, I don't know who it is, somebody stomps on the glass and the glass crunches. And then, the music starts and that's the end. Right? And that's how the wedding ceremony concludes. And this is a tradition that they do at Jewish weddings, where they stomp on the glass. That's like the symbol that I assumed, at least when I saw it in the movies, I assumed that was the symbol that the couple is now married. It's like, kaboom, like you bang the gavel, right? But actually, I did ask. There was an older guy I got to spend some time with a couple years ago out in Los Angeles. And he was an older guy who was gay, and he had just gotten married, and he was telling me about his wedding. And he was Jewish. And I asked him, I said, did you step on the glass at your wedding? And he said, yes, that's a very important part of my heritage, very important part of my tradition. We step on the glass at the wedding. And then he explained to me what that tradition means. And I guess there are many interpretations, right? It's like an oral tradition. Jews, they talk about the oral tradition. But so there's many different interpretations, I guess. But the way he explained it to me is that a wedding is a time of celebration, right? Because you're celebrating the couple getting married, possibly starting a family, all the family together. You're celebrating. It's a time of celebration. But the way he explained it was that the glass breaking, the crack in the glass, is to remind everyone there of the hard times that they had on the way to the celebration. And that is what the tradition is, right? It's you're remembering the hard times. You're having a really good time at the wedding. You're celebrating, but you're also, that crunch of the glass is there to remind you of the hard times as well. Very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. And I thought about that. I've thought about that tradition. And that's interesting to me. Because, I'm not Jewish. I don't come from a Jewish background. And, but what that points to, the idea that when you're having a very celebratory good time, you should keep the bad times and remember them as well. That brings me to an important point. A very, very important point that many people have made about human beings and their relationships and the way they relate to each other and to the world, which is that one of the strengths you can have, if you're going to be a strong, successful person in this world, is what they call, or some people call, an observer. It's the ability to not simply live in the moment. It's the ability to live in the present and the past and the future simultaneously, which is a very difficult thing for many people to do. And it is something you have to teach yourself to do, and you have to struggle to do. And some people just can't do it. But if you can live in the past, in the present, and in the future all at the same time, you can accomplish a lot. If you simply live in the moment, you're a rat in a maze, right? The rat in the science experiment maze. He's running to get the food, the peanut butter, the cheese. He's running away from the electrical shocks. He's going this way. He's going that way. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know where he came from. He's just, don't want to get zapped. Want to get some cheese. He's running this way and that way. And that's the way animals tend to live to some degree or other. And that's the way a lot of people live their lives. You know, they chase after the good. They smell something good. They run after it. They experience some pain. They run away from it. But a lot of people just don't have much of a memory. They don't have much of a memory, and they don't have much of a perception, much of a foresight. And they just kind of run through the maze of life, chasing the cheese, avoiding the electrical shocks, like an animal. But the ability to step back in that moment, in the moment you're in, and say, okay, this is where I came from. Okay, this is where I'm going to be in a few days. This is where I'm going to be in a few months. This is where I'm going to be in a few years. Of course, you don't know for sure, right? You can't predict the future. The ability to not simply be living in the present, but to operate strategically, drawing from the knowledge and wisdom of what you learned in the past and applying it in the present with an understanding of how this might pay out in the future. This is a very, very important aspect of being human and being successful as a human. They did a study years ago. It's a very famous study where they got a bunch of kids and they gave them all a marshmallow. And they said to them, you can eat your marshmallow now, but if you wait until the end of the day, you'll get 2 marshmallows. And there were some kids that ate their marshmallow right then. And there were some kids who said, wait, if I wait until the end of the day to eat my marshmallow, then I get 2 marshmallows. I'm going to wait until the end of the day because then I get 2 rather than just 1. Very famous study. And that study discovered that the kids who could wait for the 2 marshmallows were highly, highly successful. That was a huge, huge predictor of success in life. The ones who could wait for the 2 marshmallows, they went places, they achieved things, they made more money, they were happier, etc. And the kids who just, the end of the day, what's that? And they just ate the 1 marshmallow. Yeah, they tended to not go very far in this world. And it's not really a moral question. And that's what people miss about this. People try to make it a moral question. It's not really a moral question. These are kids. These are little children. It's about ability. Some of those kids had the ability to remember how good a marshmallow tastes, right? That's important because how do you know you want a marshmallow? To see it in front of them in the moment and see how much they would like to eat it. And then to realize that if they waited until the end of the day, they could get 2 marshmallows, and to be strategic, to restrain their hunger or whatever, their desire to eat a nice, sweet, tasty thing until the end of the day. And some kids were able to do that. And those were the kids that could live in the past, live in the present, and live in the future all at the same time. They had a strong observer. Whereas some of those kids, maybe they could remember how good the marshmallow was. Maybe they could feel like eating it in the moment, but they just couldn't bring themselves to be strategic and wait until the end of the day and get 2 marshmallows. However, there's another aspect of this experiment that is worth looking into, because this is again, right? I'm off the top of my head here. I've talked about these issues before, but I'm just kind of thinking at you over a microphone here on a Sunday afternoon, right? There's another aspect of this experiment. It just occurred to me, which is that those kids who sat there and said, if I wait until the end of the day, I get 2 marshmallows. They had a desire for more. And that may be an indicator as well. Because some of these kids might have just been like, well, hey, I got 1 marshmallow. I don't know what I'm doing at the end of the day. I'll just be happy with the 1 marshmallow. But then these kids, for whatever reason, the successful ones, they were like, well, I've got 1 marshmallow. I could just eat it now. But, 2 is probably better than 1. And they waited. Now, I got to tell you, when I was a kid, if they had tried this experiment on me, the results would have been skewed, because I just don't like marshmallows. I'll just tell you that. When I was a kid, marshmallows, I just didn't like them. There was just something about them and just the texture. I just don't like marshmallows. So my results, they would have given me 1 marshmallow and I wouldn't have even eaten that. I probably would have said, do I have to eat it? And they said, well, if you eat it right now, little Caleb, you can eat 2 at the end of the day. I probably would have just said, well, actually, I don't even want this one. So I'm not going to eat this one. I'm not going to eat the 2 at the end of the day. You can keep your marshmallows, Mr. Scientist. You can keep your marshmallows. You got any chocolate? You got any Reese's? You got any popcorn? But not marshmallows are just not my thing, buddy. Not my thing. So would that have ruined the results somehow? I mean, I probably, if I didn't eat that first marshmallow, I would have gotten the second one, but I wouldn't have gotten it because I had a strong observing ability. I just wouldn't have gotten it because I don't like marshmallows. I wouldn't have eaten the second one either. I would have just left my marshmallows there. Maybe I would have traded my marshmallows for, I don't know, for a toy car with another kid or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I'm just being facetious here, but it's important to be able to remember the past, remember the present, and remember the future. It's very, very important to be able to do that. Part of the reason I get so frustrated with people every time another one of these wars starts is because I feel like when it comes to the news cycle, they really don't want you to do this. They don't want you to know any history. They don't want you to really understand what's going on in the present time, and they especially don't want you to understand the future. I mean, how many times have we been there, right? Bashar Assad is killing people with chemical weapons. Oh, my God. Obama's got to send the missiles. He's got to bomb Syria. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Remember that? Right? I was there, 2013. That's the only time I've ever appeared on CNN. Mind you, my only CNN appearance ever, the only time they ever allowed me on the main cable news network in the United States was when U.S. mainstream media was going, oh my God, we're going to, Assad is gassing his own people. Obama needs to send the missiles. Obama needs to send the missiles. Here, I'll show you at risk of being arrogant, right? Why don't I just, refresh all your memories? This was September of 2013, right? I'll just put it on the screen here. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I won't because it's not here. Here it is. Yeah, September of 2013.
So as Congress makes up its mind on whether to take military action against Syria, anti-war groups are getting ready to stage protests in Times Square today. Rosa Flores joining me live now from New York. So Rosa, tell us more about the protests unfolding there in New York.
Yeah, well, those protesters are making their way here to Times Square, and I'm actually here with one of the organizers, Caleb from the International Action Center. And I know that you guys are expecting dozens, if not hundreds, of people here. But first of all, explain to us kind of what is your mission? Why are you guys here?
The last thing we need right now is a new war against Syria. Right now, they're cutting food stamps, hospitals are closing, schools are being shut down. There's a budget crisis in this country. We do not need more money for a new war against Syria. Every one of the cruise missiles they would send would cost over $1 million. That could be teachers that could be hired. That could be hospitals that could be opening. But instead, it's blowing up and killing people in another country, and that's not right.
Now, let me ask you about the support that you're getting, because from what I understand, lots of organizations are coming out of the woodwork and asking to be involved. Tell us a little bit about the involvement of other organizations that perhaps would not be, in this case, participating in something like this.
Well, 89% of the U.S. public is opposed to this war. People in this country overwhelmingly oppose an attack on Syria. But that won't mean anything unless people do something about it. If people aren't in the streets and organizing and demonstrating and making clear to the government that they will not let this war pass, that won't mean anything, because we've seen so many times the government not listen to the people and go to war. I don't believe what's coming out about this chemical weapons attack. I have a lot of questions about it. There are a lot of facts that just aren't adding up. And we've heard about weapons of mass destruction before. There's so many lies to take us into war. We don't need a new war. We need jobs, schools, education, and not a new war against the Syrian people. And these rebels that our government and our tax dollars are paying for, they're not good folks, and they're doing awful things there in Syria, and we should not be supporting these rebels in Syria.
Yeah, that was, and I've always told the story. I will never forget it. They had, that beautiful woman, Rosa Flores, right? And she was there and she interviewed me. We chatted beforehand. She asked me where I was from. I said, Ohio. And she said, I'm from Texas, and, they put me on there and they expected that I would just get on there and be like, give peace a chance, man. War is bad. They thought I would be like some kind of hippie or something, right? And when I said that little bit at the end, there, and I said, and these rebels that our tax dollars are funding, Rosa, the CNN reporter, she's holding the microphone there. She's going, when I started at the end she was happy with what I was saying. Spend money on schools and not in jobs, not war. I mean, she was fine with that. When I said, people need to protest, they're against the war. Yeah, she's fine with that. But when I said, we've heard about weapons of mass destruction before, she's like, and we've heard about weapons of mass destruction before. And then I said, and these rebels that are being backed by our tax dollars, she was just like, and then it was like, cut. And I, as soon as the feed went down, the cameraman, Rosa Flores there, the reporter, they were all just like, it was like a deer in the headlights. I think they were honestly scared of losing their jobs because of what I said, right? There are certain things you just can't say on national American television. And I have never, ever, I'll tell you that much, I have never been invited back on CNN ever again. And for a long time, we couldn't even find the clip of that. CNN doesn't have it on their website. Now, after I talked about it, and I've linked people to transcript enough times, a number of people finally reached out to me, and they were able to dig into archives online, and they were able to find it. But they didn't even really want that clip out there. Shout out to the person who found that clip for me. It was really kind of you. I really do appreciate it. But there are certain things you just can't say. But what was I saying there? I was saying we've heard about weapons of mass destruction before, like how there weren't any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Like how they said Saddam Hussein was ripping babies out of incubators, and that wasn't true. Like they said that the Taliban was refusing to give up bin Laden, which wasn't actually true. They said, just let us process him in our courts. Oh, no. Nope, they won't turn him over. So we're bombing Afghanistan. That wasn't true. how they said that, Slobodan Milosevic was committing genocide against ethnic Albanians, and that wasn't true. Every U.S. war, every single one starts with a lie. The Gulf of Tonkin was a lie. That was a complete lie. The invasion of Panama, right? I think it was 1991. George Herbert Walker Bush invaded Panama to remove Manuel Noriega. It turns out that was based on a lie, right? That they said the Panamanian soldiers had fired on U.S. troops. In reality, the U.S. troops had charged at the border without, and so they'd shot at them once. They said, oh, they fired on U.S. troops, and they invaded Panama, right? Every U.S. war starts with a lie. But yet there are certain people that just every time they follow it, and they just don't have that memory. And not only does every war, U.S. war, start with a lie, right? Libya, they said that Gaddafi was handing out Viagra so his soldiers could rape women. That wasn't true. Every U.S. war starts with a lie, number one. And then every time one of these countries is attacked and destroyed by the United States, it never benefits from it, right? Is Iraq any better off since the USA invaded in 2003? No. Is Libya any better off since NATO violently overthrew the government with cruise missiles and destroyed Libya? No. People are drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get out of Libya, the hell the United States has created in Libya. Is Afghanistan any better off? 20 years the United States occupied Afghanistan and was trying to stabilize it. Did it get any better? Nope. The drug gangs expanded. The terrorist groups expanded. More heroin was spread across the world. But no, Afghanistan did not get any better off. There's not a single place you can point to where a U.S. regime change operation has made people better. So people aren't even thinking about the future, right? It's like they're not thinking about the past and how every U.S. war has been proven to start with a lie. They're not thinking about the present. They're just assuming that what CNN tells them is true. And then they're not thinking, how is this going to play out in the long term? Okay, the USA invaded Iraq, right, to provide the Iraqi people with freedom. And what was the result of that? What was the ultimate result of that? Did the Iraqis get any better as the result of these operations? No. Did the Afghans get any better off? Did the Libya, So what is the ultimate end game of U.S. military interventions? Will it make life better for the people in these countries to have the United States go in and topple the government and bomb the country to shit? Does that make life better in countries? No, it doesn't. It clearly does not make life better in any of these countries. But this requires you to have an observer. This requires you to be able to track events for a long period of time. And they don't want you to do that. They want you to live in the moment. They want to just flash on the screen some dying children. They want you to just cry your eyes out. Oh my God, those poor children. And they don't want you to think about anything. They don't want you to ask, well, wait, is this really true? Because you guys lied a bunch of times. They don't want you to ask that. They don't want you to go, hey, is this really, if the USA invades the country, is it going to benefit the people there? Because last time, they don't want you to think about that. They just want you to look at the image that they're showing you of dying babies or mothers crying or whatever. They just want to flash that before your eyes. And they want you to be horrified by what you see and follow and obey them. That's what they want. That is what they want. And they always, and this is classic, they always portray anyone who doesn't agree with their latest operation. They always portray them as just being a cold-hearted isolationist, right? A cold-hearted person who just doesn't care about those others and says, oh, we should focus on our own thing. And they always counter that with, oh, I think we have a moral responsibility to do something. We have a moral. And then they've even talked about adding this to the UN Charter, R2P, responsibility to protect, right? And they morally grandstand about it. That's how they operate. And you know what the most sinister thing about this is? Right? Most people are good. This is what this really points to. Most people are good. Most people have an altruistic, compassionate side deeply embedded into their character, or else this wouldn't work. Right? The fact that, if they flash images before you on CNN or MSNBC or Fox of children dying, and they say, don't you want to do something about it? And that's the way they sell the wars. That indicates that most of us generally have compassion on other people. This is somebody in some other country we don't even know, but CNN is showing us images of them dying and plucking our heartstrings with it. And many of us fall for it because we're good people, because we care. The problem is that our good intentions, our basic human solidarity, our desire to help our fellow man, our desire to alleviate the suffering of some other person, is being intentionally manipulated by some of the most evil people in history. They know that we're good in our souls. They know that we have love in our hearts. They know that we're not like them. We're not evil. We're not selfish. We're not murderous. We're not ruthless like they are. Unlike them, we have basic human compassion. And in their eyes, they see that as a weakness. They think we're stupid because we care about our fellow human beings, right? Oh, these people, they care about other people. What losers. Oh my God, what a fool. He cares about somebody else. I've heard that in Washington, D.C., among career politicians, aspiring political figures, they have an insult that they use for people who actually believe in right and wrong. And they call them Boy Scouts. Oh, so-and-so is such a Boy Scout. He thinks right and wrong exist. He wants to help other people. Oh, boy. Look, there's a little Boy Scout. That's the term that they use to deride people who actually believe in right and wrong. And they think that it is a sign of inferiority, that the idea that we want to help other people, that we want to do what's right, they view that as a flaw in our character, that we're weak, we're inferior somehow because we want to help other people. Meanwhile, they think that what makes them so great is that they have no such feelings. And it is their ability to manipulate such feelings to achieve what they want that they consider to be one of their greatest attributes. And that is the way our leaders see things. And if you read my latest book, Where is America Going? Well, it's not my latest book, but one of my books I published this year, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. If you've read this book, you'll know Chapter 4, I spell out what the worldview that has become the ruling ideology in our time. The ruling ideology in our time is the worldview that has come to dominate Western society is called philosophical irrationalism. That is what the elite believe. And there are many different strands of philosophical irrationalism. There's many different variants that emphasize different aspects of philosophical irrationalism. But more or less, all of the elite in the West, all of the political leaders, all the owners of major corporations, all the people that are setting the curriculum for big universities, all the people in the media, the major mainstream media, they all more or less have a philosophical irrationalist view of the world. Now, what is philosophical irrationalism? It's funny, Jonathan, you say this, basically as close to Satanism as possible. You're literally correct. Literal Satanism, a religion started by Anton LaVey, preaches this very concept. I am not exaggerating, right? You want to say Satan in terms of evil, but I'm telling you about the literal Church of Satan. Followers of Anton LaVey, this is what they think. They literally believe compassion is weakness. You should be blatantly selfish. That is what they believe. But philosophical irrationalism, it goes back to a debate that took place in the 1800s. There are many different philosophers arguing about the nature of the world. There are certain debates that have just gone on in philosophy for thousands of years, right? We know about idealism versus materialism. I think, therefore I am, says Descartes. I am, therefore I think, says Marx and materialism, right? That's idealism versus materialism. But the debate between the rationalists and the irrationalists was, is the universe defined by order, or is the universe defined by chaos? Is there order in the universe, or is the universe defined by chaos? And those who believe that the universe is defined by order are called rationalists. They believe that the universe is, to some degree or other, rational. And they point toward mathematics and the laws of physics to indicate that there is a rationality to the universe. However, you have a strand of people called the irrationalists, who argue that the universe is not defined by order, but rather by chaos, that there's no beginning and there is no end. There is no creator. There's no Big Bang. There's no origin. And there is no end. And it's just a bunch of crazy chaos. Nowadays, many of them would say we're just headed toward entropy. We're just headed toward entropy. We're just eventually headed toward entropy. Eventually, the universe just slows down, right? We're heading toward entropy. And those who adhere to philosophical irrationalism view all attempts to create an understanding of reality, to point to actual truths, as totalitarian. They say that if you're going around telling people that there is actual truth in this world, there is actual morality in this world, that there is objective reality, that some things are actually true and some things are actually false, that if you do that, you are being totalitarian. And that is a crime. And that rather, they argue, the only ethical or moral way to behave, they argue, is to engage in deconstruction, to take narratives apart. Postmodernism is a modern form of philosophical irrationalism. It argues that any grand narrative of human history, any ideology and worldview is somehow a vehicle for oppressing people. It's a vehicle through which the sheep assemble to suppress the great thinkers, the great intellectuals. Christianity is a plot by the inferior rabble to hold back the great men who could rule over the rest of us with their superiority. That is what they believe, that the superior ones are being held down by morality, being held down by truth, being held down by ethical systems and narratives, etc. And so the best thing to do is to take apart ethical systems, to take apart ideology, to take apart narratives, so that we can be reduced to the law of the jungle, and the strongest can work their way to the top without any restraints upon them. This is philosophical irrationalism. And Friedrich Nietzsche is probably the most outspoken and most prominent voice of philosophical irrationalism. And if you want to read a very thorough critique of the Nietzschean worldview, read The Destruction of Reason by George Lukács. Not a short text, but George Lukács was a Hungarian communist leader, and he wrote this book explaining how the crimes of the Nazis were rooted in philosophical irrationalism. Martin Heidegger and Friedrich Nietzsche were both more or less giving voice to this notion that the world is simply a jungle where the strongest survive, and that right and wrong and ethical systems and truths are just for suckers. That's the worldview that they put forward. And that among our elite in the United States, all of them more or less believe one version of this or other. You know, Ayn Rand, now her objectivism isn't into the irrationalist aspect so much, but it's really into compassion is weakness, the guilt-peddling Jesus industry, I believe she called Christianity. Ayn Rand has her own version of this, and that's popular at business schools. I believe Stacey Abrams, as well as Paul Ryan, both cite Ayn Rand as one of their greatest intellectual influences. They read Atlas Shrugged. They read all of that. But a thinker who's probably much more influential among the American elite, pushing a philosophical irrationalist view, is a guy named Leo Strauss. And his piece was Persecution and the Art of Writing. It's a philosophy book he wrote, basically arguing that all of modern philosophy was written in code because the great philosophers were being persecuted. They were being persecuted by the irrational or by the inferior sheep. All of philosophy has been written in code because the great intellectuals, the philosopher kings that Plato spoke of, live in fear of the rabble who would try to make them conform. And so they write in code. And that is Leo Strauss' big academic thesis. And Leo Strauss cultivated many of his students to view themselves as a superior caste of intellectuals whose job was to rule over the inferior ones. And that in order to do so, in order to protect freedom, right? When the great philosopher kings rule over the inferior ones, that's freedom. But the greatest threat to freedom, he argued, was populism. When the inferior ones get together and start demanding their rights, start demanding jobs and schools and housing and healthcare and education. Oh my God, that's totalitarianism. That's a threat. When the rich and powerful, the rulers, the elite, when they start getting told what to do by the people. Democracy is dictatorship. Democracy is the end of freedom because it takes away the ability of the great intellectual, the great superior ones to rule over the rest of us. And so when the sheep get together and start rallying and organizing and building mass movements, and sometimes they're communist and sometimes they're fascist and sometimes they're Christian, and sometimes they're Muslim. But whatever it is, whenever the rabble start getting together and organizing and demanding the elite and telling the rich people, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. You must do this. You must do this. We need jobs. We need housing. We need our services to be met. We cannot let you rule over us. We have demands. We will assert our humanity. Whenever that starts happening, that's the end of freedom. Because freedom is the ability of the natural superiors to just rise to the top with no interference. That's the Straussian worldview. That mobilization of the people, democratic participation, mass movements are inherently totalitarian. And then in order to prevent them, and this is the interesting part, it is necessary for the elite to dumb things down, to make things simple. You're on the list, Gabby. To make things simple, to spread propaganda, to craft the minds of the masses, to make sure they never get mobilized and become a threat to the freedom of the great intellectual. It is necessary to engage in the noble lie. And this is a big aspect of neoconservative thinking. In order to keep the masses in line, in order to protect freedom, freedom which is defined by the great intellectual not being suppressed by the rabble, in order to protect the freedom of the philosopher kings from the populism and the mass movements and the moral and ethical inclinations and the needs of the people, in order to do that, it is necessary for the elite to deceive the masses. Now, a lot of Leo Strauss's writing is not available. It's not. Leo Strauss had kind of a club of students, his promising students, people that he thought were high achieving. He would invite them over to his house. He would have social events with them. And Leo Strauss was connected with American intelligence. And those who really got his worldview rose up on the left and on the right. Very interesting. Susan Sontag, she was trained by Leo Strauss, and she was a leftist. But many of the Bush administration, Reagan administration conservatives were also trained by Leo Strauss. But if you were somebody who really grasped his elitist worldview, you would be invited into his kind of inner circle, and he would cultivate you to think a certain way. And doors would be opened for you, and you would find your way into the elite. And Leo Strauss, his favorite television program was Gunsmoke. You ever see Gunsmoke? You ever watch Gunsmoke? It's an old television program from the 1950s. A cowboy show. The good guy always wears a white hat, and he's all good. Doesn't have any negative attributes. And the bad guy, he wears a black hat, and he's all bad. He does not have a single redeeming quality. And there is no question about who's right, and there's no question about who's wrong, and the bad guy always loses, and the good guy always wins. And there's always a happy ending. Gunsmoke. Leo Strauss loved Gunsmoke. And he thought that that was how the American people, the sheep, the inferior ones, should be cultivated to understand the world. That the complexities of the world and reality were reserved for the elite, but for the masses, they needed Gunsmoke. And don't underestimate how influential Leo Strauss was. They call him the intellectual godfather of neoconservatism. They also give that title to Irving Kristol. But don't underestimate how influential he was because we had two presidents. Two. Who directly worked to cultivate a cowboy persona. One of them was Ronald Reagan, who was himself a cowboy actor. He had played cowboys in cowboy movies. He was a cowboy actor who got into politics. And the other was George W. Bush, who was born in Connecticut and had a father from Connecticut, an old money Yale skull and bones dad. But yet, when George W. Bush ran for president, he put his cowboy hat on. He cut brush out on his ranch. He had Barney the dog. And he talked like this. My fellow Americans, George W. Bush, Commander-in-Chief of America. We're going to save the country from Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda are terrorists, and they're bad. I'm going to destroy Al-Qaeda. George W. Bush, Commander-in-Chief of America. He actively cultivated a cowboy persona. Well, what was that about? I think the fact that the public relations of two neoconservative presidents actively fit a cowboy movie has a lot to do with the fact that the intellectual godfather of neoconservatism said that Americans should understand foreign policy and the world in terms of Gunsmoke. I think it has a lot to do with that. It has a lot to do with that. I think it has a lot to do with that. I don't think you can underestimate that one bit. Not one bit can you underestimate that. But the more you look into philosophical irrationalism, the more you look into the way our elites rule over us and the way that they see things, the more that you can see that this is all just kind of like a dog chasing its tail. Why is it necessary for the elite to rule over us? Well, because we're not as smart as them. Right? They're the smart ones. They're the superior ones. And why is populism and mass movements so bad? Because it would lead to the people not being ruled over, not suppressing them. So isn't that democracy? If the masses of people getting together and asserting their desires in the form of a popular mobilization is somehow considered to be a bad thing, if the will of the people being enacted, if the elite being forced to comply with the needs of the masses, if the actions of the state require the consent of the government, isn't that democracy? Isn't that democracy that they're against? But they say they're defending democracy. They say that they are defending democracy because they're defending freedom. But if the people are being lied to and manipulated and being controlled, and any effort to bring the people into politics and mobilize the people to assert their needs is being suppressed, isn't that the opposite of freedom? Isn't that totalitarianism? But no, it's to stop totalitarianism. It's a dog chasing its tail. They don't know what they believe. It is the confused notions of the elite. But it points to a reality of U.S. society. And the world today that is very, very hard for them to explain. I've been to Russia before. I'm going again this week. Putin's wildly popular. He's a wildly, wildly popular person. I was there in the 2018 elections. I covered the 2018 elections in Russia. Putin is a wildly popular guy. But we're told Russia is not a democracy. We are told, even though they had elections that were monitored, even though Putin clearly won the elections by a lot, even though no one disputes the fact that Russians like Putin. Putin is very popular. His policies are very popular with the Russian people. We are told Russia is not a democracy. Meanwhile, here in the United States, we elect our leaders, all kinds of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, but nobody's happy. Nobody is happy. Everybody's upset. We're mad at Joe Biden. People were mad at Donald Trump before that. People were mad at Barack Obama before that. Everyone is unhappy. If you ask people how Congress is doing, they go, blah. People are mad about not having jobs. People are mad about not having health care. People are mad about the roads in their neighborhoods crumbling. They're mad about the drug gangs and the narco gangs that are destroying people's lives. They're mad about unrest. They're mad about the suppression and the rolling back of their civil liberties. They're mad. They're unhappy. Nobody likes the American government. People on the far left are mad and unhappy. People on the far right are mad and unhappy. People in red states are mad and unhappy. People in blue states are mad and unhappy. Everybody is dissatisfied. Everyone's upset. Big problems in our society aren't getting resolved. They're not getting resolved the way one group would want it, and they're not getting resolved in the way the other group would want it. Things aren't getting fixed. Shit's broke, and it ain't getting fixed. I think Bill Cosby, he said, all the dogs are pooping, and nobody is scooping. Are we allowed to talk about Bill Cosby? I think he's a rapist or something. Whatever. All the dogs are pooping and nobody is scooping. Problems ain't getting solved. Everyone's mad and upset. But we all go to the polls and we vote. And we elect a gridlocked Congress. We have a president that half the country hates. And then we get another president and the other half the country hates him. But this is democracy. This is freedom. Meanwhile, these countries that we're told to hate, China, Russia, Vietnam, Cuba, North Korea, Nicaragua, Venezuela, these countries, the leaders are very, very popular. They come into office and they say, we are going to solve this problem. And they win the election and they get into office and then they solve the problem. Well, that's dictatorship, we're told. That's dictatorship. But here in the United States, the problems never get solved. Everyone is mad at the government all the time. Nothing gets fixed, but we're free. But we're free. That's freedom, we're told. Well, I think it's about time we realized it's freedom because they are free. They are free from us. It's freedom for them when they don't have to care what we want. When they can continue to enrich themselves and we can continue to get poorer. When they can continue to let our neighborhoods crumble while they bomb countries overseas, that's freedom. Freedom for them is freedom from us. That's what they mean when they say freedom. And when they say dictatorship, what they mean is when they are no longer free from us. When some kind of mass movement, some kind of popular mobilization, some kind of leader emerges who can kick their ass, who can kick them around, who can force them to do what the masses of people want. When that happens, that's what they call dictatorship. And they do not like that. And that is what you need to understand. And that is my message for you all this afternoon. Those are my opening remarks. So take from them what you will. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I am glad to be here with you all tonight. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. I see we've got a Rumble rant from Jamie Turner. That's very, very good. I see that we have we have some do we have some I see we got some chat activity from Hempcar on Rockfin. Very, very good. Shout out to you, Hempcar. We got a number of super chats to get to. So names and locations. Let's do this. Conrad in Poland, Gonzalo in Argentina, Lawrence Johnson in Chicago, Gabby Hernandez in Chicago. We got Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Brad in Cleveland, Meredith and Quinn, Patch in Arizona. Welcome, Patch. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Escondido, California, Phil in Miami, Alex from Brazil, California, Jenny, Simon in Oslo, Jackie in Rocky Mountain High, Jonathan C. in Los Angeles, Mohsen Arab from Iran, California Mima Flowers, Anthony from Detroit, Molly from Orange County, Ron McKinnon in New York City. Welcome, Ron McKinnon. LJ in Vancouver. Work in progress in Ottawa. I've come to wive it wealthily in Ottawa. Ian in England with a honey, nunny, nunny, and a hey, hey, hey. Hi, Aberdeen, Scotland, Mark. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Karen Mendes is in Germany. Patrick in Maine. LJ in Vancouver. On the Rockfin, we've got Ellie in Chicago is in on the Rockfin, and so is Hempcar. And we got St. David's Bermuda, and he's on the Rumble. Glad you're watching. Very, very good. Very, very good. All right, folks. I'm going to start answering people's questions now. If people have more super chats, things they'd like me to react to, shoot them my way. Another quick reminder that we have our convention coming up. Please make a point of coming. It's going to be awesome. Portland, Oregon, December 2nd. Be there. We need you there. Please sign up. Please attend. More people, the merrier. The hall holds 250, and we're going to fill it up. So please be there. If you are able to come, please register. Register on Eventbrite. That would be the way to do it. I will drop the link. I'm going to drop it on all 3 platforms. I'll drop the link. Please register. Register on Eventbrite because we need to know who's coming. Register on Eventbrite, right? The more people, the merrier. Very, very good. We need people that are going to be there to register so that we know that you're going to be there. Donations are appreciated. That'll help us do our event if you can do that. But it is a free event. All donations are optional. It's welcome to everyone who comes. So there you go. So just want to remind you all about our conference that's coming up. All right. Okay. So let's do, we got a Rumble rant. One Rumble rant is from Jamie Turner. He asks, what is your net assessment of Chomsky and his impact on the world, positive or negative? Well, it's hard to say. All right. Noam Chomsky he's played many different roles throughout his life. Let me just put it that way. Noam Chomsky, he is a Jewish American, and he grew up in New York City. And his parents were in or around the Communist Party. They weren't. I think his mother in particular was in the Communist Party. I think that they were from a working class neighborhood in Brooklyn. And the Communist Party back in those days, it had a baseball league and it had a soccer league, and it was just he's from a certain demographic of U.S. society. And in the 1930s, in Brooklyn, New York, and in Chicago, and in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and in certain urban centers, there were certain communities where the communists were the community organization. They had the baseball team, they had the choir, they had the marching band, and he grew up around the Communist Party, but he didn't join the Communist Party. But he was just, I think his mother had been in the Communist Party. I'm not even sure of that, to be honest with you. But regardless, he grew up around the Communist Party. He grew up around it, and he knew of it. He understood their worldview. He had more or less a leftist perspective, and he was very, very successful in academia. He became a very famous linguist, and he wrote books about linguistic theory, and he became like the top linguistic scholar in the United States. And during the Vietnam War, he was one of the first intellectuals to come out strongly against the Vietnam War. And he gave little talks in people's living rooms at Yale and Harvard, and he taught at MIT, so mainly in the Boston area. He would sit in people's living rooms and explain to them the other side of the story when it came to Vietnam. Actually, the people in Vietnam don't appreciate the United States being there. Ho Chi Minh led an anti-colonial struggle. He would, give the other side of the story in Vietnam. And he was this famous academic, and he got involved in speaking at anti-war protests and such. And as the 1960s went on, he was just this very, very smart intellectual who was associated with the anti-Vietnam War movement. He was somebody within the power structure. He was a top academic who made a point of publicly sympathizing with anti-war activism, with the Black liberation struggle, etc. And from what I understand, Noam Chomsky, he was known to, he would sign his name, on to, if someone was arrested for anti-war protesting, he would often send them money to support them. If somebody was, was charged with a crime, he would speak up on their behalf. And he was just this famous professor who happened to be a leftist, right? In the 1970s, as the 60s political upsurge came to a close, he suddenly became like a superstar in whatever was left of the peace movement. Whatever was left of the peace movement, he was just this very intellectual guy who, in addition to being a linguist, went around and gave speeches criticizing U.S. foreign policy. And he was often quoted in Soviet media. And that was one thing that he became known for, right? Is that he would give quotes to Soviet media outlets. And many times you will see Noam Chomsky referenced as the most quoted source in the English language after the Bible. And that's because he was this well-known academic who would say that the USA was wrong to fund the Contras in Nicaragua, or would say that, there's two sides of the story in Vietnam or whatever. Soviet media would quote him. And so he just became this well-known figure, and Soviet media would go all over the world, translated into many different languages, right? The Soviet Union and their allies would publish articles, and there'd be quotes from Noam Chomsky in them. And he would say things that were critical of U.S. foreign policy, and that was like his gig. He was the famous American college professor dude who was against U.S. foreign policy. But he would always disavow, denounce, and oppose whoever the USA was fighting. But sometimes you have to wonder how, like, did he really mean it or what? Sometimes you have to wonder about that. Because, there's a picture of him, like, hugging Fidel Castro at one point. And that he'd said things about the Sandinistas. And sometimes people wonder, like, was he just saying the anti-Soviet stuff to cover his ass or what? But he represented a strata of U.S. society of people that were, Cold War leftists, Cold War anti-capitalists. But whenever he was speaking, he would always repeat the anti-Soviet, anti-communist, anti-Nicaraguan, anti-Cuban, he would criticize, he would denounce, and just all of his speaking was generally predicated on the assumption that whatever the United States was saying about some country they wanted to attack was true, but, and then he would just give the other side of the story. And what was weird about it was like, you have to wonder if he was almost like a release valve, right? Because it's like all over the world, there are many people that are very, very critical of U.S. policy and U.S. foreign policy. And it's like, there had to be some expression of that in U.S. society. If U.S. society was going to claim to be a democratic place, there had to be somebody who would get up and say the other side of the story. There was Noam Chomsky. And most Americans had never heard of Noam Chomsky. But he would go on NPR a lot, every so often. He'd occasionally write a little article for the New York Times. And he would do a lot of interviews for international media. And he was just the official foreign policy critic of the United States. And people would joke about it, right? And they're like, oh, I'm sure Noam Chomsky's against it, right? And it was just, oh, he's against America. He hates America. He blames America for all the world's problems. And he was this, and he had his glasses and he was hunched over and he talked he had this very non-charismatic way of speaking, a lot of drawn out analogies about blah, 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 and, but he was there to give, in a very long, drawn-out way, the other side of the story. That's the role that he played. And as the Soviet Union was falling, he continued this role. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, when there was massive outrage about neoliberalism, he also gave voice to that. He would get up and talk about neoliberal economics and what was happening in, the former Soviet Union and what was happening in Latin America, and he would be critical of it. In this very long and drawn out way. And after 9/11, I remember I was a kid and he was held up. He was the one critic of the Iraq War. He was the one critic of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan that you could find. And again, it was never very slick or charismatic stuff, right? It was always very like dry, long, drawn out. I remember one of his books that he wrote after 9/11 I read. And it was like, after the 9/11 attacks, people are saying that New York City looks like Beirut. And that's true. But Beirut also looks like Beirut. And U.S. policies have contributed to Beirut looking like Beirut. And, there's a number of examples of the United States bombing and backing terrorist groups that committed atrocities around the world. And everything's not so black and white. The United States does bad things too. And it's just very, very boring, and it's very, very not concise. But the information is generally good, and he's pointing out the United States has harmed a lot of people around the world, and, Osama bin Laden was really trained by the United States, and he killed a lot of people in Afghanistan, and I don't know. that was Noam Chomsky, and he was also against capitalism, right? And he had talks, and he always talked about how he was an anarchist. He was an anarchist. He wasn't a communist. He denounced the Soviet Union. He would always accuse the Soviet Union of, atrocities against various, people. And he was so much more radical. He believed in and democracy. And this is the important thing. The value that he was always going for was democracy. It was about mass participation, right? The critique of capitalism was not overproduction. The critique of capitalism was not a lack of economic development. The solution was always mass democratic participation. And capitalism, puts the power in the hands of a very rich elite, and it, mesmerizes the masses with television. We need mass democratic participation. We need to fulfill the democratic ideal. People need to be involved in the decision-making in their workplace and their factory. That was Noam Chomsky. Well, after Barack Obama got elected, you'll notice that Noam Chomsky's traditional role took a curve, and Noam Chomsky went in a completely different direction after Barack Obama got elected. Very, very interesting. So after Barack Obama got elected, you'll remember the Arab Spring happened. And all of a sudden, Noam Chomsky was saying almost the same thing that CNN was saying. Now, when it came to Israel-Palestine, he was very harshly critical of Israel. However, he supported the overthrow of Gaddafi. Gaddafi was a brutal dictator. It was a revolution of the people. He went as far as saying that the USA doesn't want to overthrow the Syrian government because it's more afraid of the popular revolutionary movement of the people against Assad than of the Syrian government, which is a joke, which is just an utter joke. The USA was clearly trying to overthrow the Syrian government. And that the other thing is that Noam Chomsky and Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Basically talked the same line when it came to China, any anti-China protests they supported. Came to Russia, anti-Putin, anti-Putin, any anti-Russia protests they supported. When it came to overthrowing Libya, overthrowing Syria, they were always on the side of the United States. They're critical of Israel. And I have actually met Noam Chomsky, right? And I again, at risk of being obnoxious, right? Here I am name dropping or whatever, but I want to show you the clip of me with Noam Chomsky, not to brag that I met him, but I want to show you my one interaction with Noam Chomsky because it was recorded. This was at the United Nations. I'm just going to put this on here, right? Just what the heck? Why not? Right? So I'm going to put this on here, right? I am going to put it on the screen, and I see that we have a Rockfin tip that has just come in. Ellie, you are spot on about Chomsky's speaking style. I sure do miss Jimmy Dore's stoned Chomsky, says Ellie. Wow, that's sweet. But here, I'm going to put on my interaction with Chomsky. When I was working at the United Nations, I was a reporter for Press TV, the TV network from Iran, and the Arab League brought Noam Chomsky to speak at the United Nations. Saudi Arabia, all the Muslim countries in the Middle East, all the Arab countries brought Noam to speak against Israel. He was brought to the United Nations and probably paid a huge amount of money. I don't even want to know how much he was paid. I'm thinking, 7 or 8 figures. But, he was paid a huge amount of money by the Arab League, by all these oil-producing governments, to come to the United Nations and give a speech condemning Israel to the United Nations. So I was there, and I figured he's given an anti-Israel speech, and he's a critic of U.S. foreign policy. So I decided to ask Noam Chomsky about the nuclear scientists who had just been murdered, right? A number of Iranian nuclear scientists had just been murdered. So Noam Chomsky's there at the UN, at the request of the Arab League, giving a speech criticizing Israel, and it turns out Israel was involved in killing these nuclear scientists. I asked Noam Chomsky about it. Here we go.
News. And in the last couple days, there have been reports in the U.S. media quoting figures from the Mujahideen Khalq, which is a terrorist organization, alleging that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. And it has been leaked that the Israeli government has cooperated with Mujahideen Khalq to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists. And my question is that a violation of international law? And why is it that Israel is cooperating with what was at one point universally recognized as a violent terrorist organization?
Violation of international, we can debate this or that fact that's not yet accepted and agreed, but there are gross violations of international law which are proclaimed openly and publicly and presented with self-praise. So, for example, suppose that when President Obama...
Notice his answer has nothing to do with my question. I asked him about the U.S., about Israel teaming up with Mujahideen Khalq to kill Iranian nuclear scientists, and he has Has nothing to do with my question.
Or any any American diplomat or journalist says that with regard to Iran, all options are open, as is said constantly. What does that mean? All options are open means force is open, means nuclear attack is open. Those of you who may recall an obscure document called the UN Charter might remember Article 2, which bans the threat or use of force.
Has nothing to do with my question.
In international affairs, the threat or use of force.
Yeah. He basically answered my question with the 4 Ds of dodgeball: dip, dodge, duck, and dodge. And it's weird because you would think, as this big supporter of international law, here we have Israel teaming up with a group of terrorists to murder nuclear scientists from Iran. You would think that would be a no-brainer for Mr. Noam. He's always criticizing Israel. He's always criticizing what the United States does. He just it'd be an obvious no-brainer. But he didn't give me an answer there. Why not? Because the Arabs were paying him. That's why. Saudi Arabia was paying him. And at that point, the Saudis and Jordan and Oman and Qatar and all of that, they hated Iran. And he was there at the request of the Arab League at the United Nations. And so if he had said to me, yeah, that was wrong to kill those nuclear scientists, that would have been a diss to the people that were paying him. He was there to talk against Israel in a very roundabout way, to criticize Israel. That's what he was doing. And, if you listened to Noam during the Obama administration, his speeches, along with Amy Goodman's, along with the International Socialist Organization, the ISO, they followed the foreign policy of Al Jazeera and Qatar, right? It was whatever, they were against Israel, but they were also against all the governments around the region that were against the United States. And if there were any big protests happening in Egypt or in Syria or in Libya or anywhere that were being led by the Muslim Brotherhood, they loved them. And that it seemed like whatever division of American intelligence was in charge of mobilizing the Muslim Brotherhood to protest in the street in support of U.S. foreign policy, Al Jazeera was broadcast from Qatar. The Turkish government and the Qatari government were funding the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Arab Spring protests were happening, and that was where Noam Chomsky and Amy Goodman were. They supported the Arab Spring. And they took the Muslim Brotherhood position, basically, in the Middle East. They were not Saudi Wahhabis, but they were certainly not anti-imperialist Iranian Shias. They hated the Iranian government. They hated the Syrian government. They hated Gaddafi. And they were cheering for the Muslim Brotherhood. And I don't know why, because the Muslim Brotherhood is very pro-capitalist. They're the westernized Muslims. But that's who Noam was supporting. And that's who the International Socialist Organization and Haymarket Books was supporting. And that's who Amy Goodman was supporting. And that's who Barack Obama was supporting. So much so that Barack Obama would diss the Saudis every so often. The First Lady didn't wear a headscarf when she was in Saudi Arabia as a diss to the Saudis. Even though it's your country, even though you set the law and the dress code, well, we're the United States, so fuck you, right? That was Barack Obama. He didn't much care for the Saudis. He wanted the Muslim Brotherhood to be his fighters. And then, right, since Donald Trump has taken office, right, Chomsky has taken the position that Donald Trump is the most evil thing ever that ever existed, the main danger, fascism, blah, 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 blah. And you'll notice that he didn't support the Rage Against the War Machine protest in Washington, D.C. that happened on February 19th. But he did support the Answer Coalition protest that happened a month later that was much smaller. And he then spoke the next day, I believe, in Washington, D.C. He didn't speak at it. The next day, he had an event at a church where he spoke to this big event that was saying, maybe we shouldn't have World War III with Russia. And he began his speech in this church in front of everyone. He began his speech, from what I understand, by saying, I just want to make clear, we are here to denounce Vladimir Putin, and the room gave a huge standing ovation. That's Noam Chomsky. I mean, look, I don't know, right? Things are not a conspiracy, right? And this is what people need to understand. There's way too much like conspiratorial thinking. Noam Chomsky, the CIA doesn't call up Noam Chomsky and tell him, all right, I want you to say this, and then I want you to say this, and then after that, I want you to... No, it doesn't work that way. Noam thinks and believes what he's saying. But he's been enabled to be this guy because he will do it in a way that somebody else who might be that guy would do it and cause more damage. Basically, during the late Cold War, they needed somebody to be this guy. They needed somebody to be the voice of Americans who don't agree with U.S. foreign policy, someone who would present the other side of the story when it came to U.S. foreign policy. But they needed it to be somebody who was not very interesting and charismatic, somebody who would definitely not create any sympathy for the Soviet Union or for the communists, but would, be criticizing the United States. Somebody who would do it in a way that it would, that's basically what Chomsky is. They needed somebody for the job, and he got it. And he's an old school leftist, right? His parents were communists, and he, is in the middle class, but he comes from like a communist family. And, he represents a layer of U.S. society. And honestly, I think there's probably many people in New York City, many people in Boston, many people in San Francisco, California, who maybe have never even read Noam Chomsky. There's not many of them, maybe thousands, whose parents were in the Communist Party. And they went and they protested the Vietnam War, and they were against the Vietnam War, and they supported the Civil Rights Movement. And now they hate Donald Trump, and they hate Vladimir Putin. And they don't like Republicans because Republicans are racist. And that's Noam Chomsky is the voice of those people. He's the voice of the children of the Communist Party, right? Because the Communist Party, you have to remember, right? In the 1930s, these people had just gotten off the boat from Russia or Lithuania or Poland or wherever they came from. And they were starving. And they were living in Brooklyn, and they were hungry. And they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And a lot of them didn't speak English. They spoke Russian, they spoke Yiddish, they spoke Lithuanian, they spoke Polish, and they were hungry. And the Communist Party was in their neighborhood, and it said, fight or starve. And it mobilized them to go protest at City Hall and go organize unions in their factories. And they were loyal to the Communist Party, and they thought the Soviet Union was the country that was on their side, and they wanted to overthrow the American government, and they believed in communism. But then World War II happened, and during World War II, the position was that, the Soviet Union was fully aligned with the American government. So they became ultra-patriotic, and they were big supporters of the war, defeat fascism. And then after the war, the Communist Party was heavily suppressed, and so a lot of them just sold out, and a lot of them got jobs in the middle class, where they could suddenly, they had been factory workers and desperately poor people, but now their kids, the next generation were doctors and lawyers and college professors, and they were in the middle class. So that changed their perspective, right? They weren't at odds with the system any longer. And then, so many of them were quitting because they didn't want to get canceled for being communists during McCarthyism. And then the icing on the cake was 1956. Khrushchev came along and took a dump on the global communist movement and said that everything that they'd said about Stalin was true. And a lot of them were like, what the hell did I do this for? I thought Stalin was amazing. And now the leader of the Soviet Union says Stalin was no good. I quit. I'm embarrassed I was ever associated with it. You all suck. And they slammed the door and walked out. But their kids went to protest the Vietnam War, burned their draft cards, and they were not comfortable with anti-communism because they had been in the Communist Party, or their parents had been in the Communist Party. So if people started talking against communism, it made them kind of uncomfortable. They didn't like Republicans. They had this kind of gut level feeling that Republicans were bad. The military was bad. They supported black people. They didn't like racism. And now their kids all work at NGOs and have purple and pink hair and like a bunch of piercings and are obsessed with the transgender issue. And Noam Chomsky, he represents that demographic, okay? And that's just, there's a layer of Americans who are quite wealthy, right? I mean, they didn't start out that way, but there's about three generations they've been building themselves up. The NGO apparatus, the George Soros NGO apparatus, Planned Parenthood, Students Against Sweatshops, the Ford Foundation, all these liberal foundations and think tanks are all staffed by third generation people like this. And Noam Chomsky is like the most famous person from this demographic. He's the most famous of them. And he's second generation, right? There's a third generation, which are like my age, right? And then Chomsky's parents are the first generation that were like actually communists for a while, at least until the 50s. They were like actually communists, right? And it's this third generation of American radicalism. And that's Noam Chomsky is the second generation, and it's a certain demographic of U.S. society. It's always shrinking. A lot of them are just quitting. A lot of them became big supporters of Israel because they were Jewish and they supported Israel and anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. So they became conservative or big supporters of Israel. And a lot of them, they just got burned by politics. A lot of them joined religious cults. That was a really common thing. They joined some, religious movement during the 1960s. They were alienated by Marxism. They thought Marxism was square and it wasn't, radical enough. So they became Hare Krishnas, or they joined some Scientology or some mystical movement, and that kind of channeled them in a conservative direction or channeled them somewhere else. And it's just a shrinking demographic of U.S. society. In the 1930s, the Communist Party of the United States had a big section of the population, not huge, I mean like 10% maybe of the population that was loyal to them. That kind of took political direction from them. Very few of them actually joined because being a full party member was a very stringent, demanding thing. Many of them never actually joined, but they lived in a communist neighborhood. They worked in a factory where the communists ran the labor union. They were in a communist unemployment association. They were in a communist anti-fascist association on their college campus. There was about 10% of the American population in the 1930s that was following the Communist Party, getting political direction from the Communist Party, etc. Well, they had kids, and Noam is one of their kids. And their kids had kids, and their kids now are the highest paid and most well-entrenched leaders of wokeism. And they suck. I mean, there's no other way to put it. They all suck. I mean, they're not going anywhere, right? They've gotten more and more pro-imperialist and less revolutionary over time. They've gotten more and more middle class the longer they've been in the country, which tends to happen, right? The first generation immigrants tend to be poor, their kids tend to be richer, and their kids tend to be even richer. They're wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. They're more and more middle class, and they're less and less radical, and they're more and more pro-imperialist and entrenched with the establishment. And it's just Noam represents them, right? That's who Noam represents. He represents a wing of U.S. society. And what I have repeated over and over and over again, it's been like a mantra here, is if there's any future for American communism, it's getting out of this stratum. This stratum is dead. It is dead. Okay? The future of American communism is not with these people. All right? And please don't misinterpret this. They're not all Jews. Okay? And anyone who thinks that I'm talking about Jews is wrong. Okay? Because a lot of them are not. A lot of them are Polish. A lot of them are Irish. A lot of them are Italian, right? There are a lot of Jews among them, but they're not the only ones, right? And there are many Jews that have never been part of this, too. I mean, in the Bronx during the 1930s, the Jacob Schiff Center, Zionism, there's always been a big section of the Jewish community that wants nothing to do with these people, right? That thinks these people are traitors. And these people tend to be harshly critical of Israel, which the bulk of the Jewish community is not. So I'm not talking about Jews, all right? I'm talking about the children and grandchildren of communists. That's what I'm talking about, right? And the children and grandchildren of communists, there you go. That's Noam represents them. And again, I don't think the CIA calls him up and says, all right. No, I don't think it's like that at all. I think he believes everything he's saying. There are many people from his generation whose parents were communists, whose grandkids are wokes, who think exactly like he does. He represents that. Okay. That's Noam. And he's just the voice of one demographic of U.S. society that was very heavily influenced by communism at one time and has taken a long walk, been on down a long road since then. And I hope that this is interesting. I hope this is amusing. to everybody. And that is my long answer to that question. Next question. Is socialism compatible with mass consumerism? Yes and no. All right. Do socialists want people to have less? No. Do socialists believe that the problems in the environment or the problem with capitalism is that everyone has too much stuff? No. Do socialists believe that that growth is bad and that we want everyone to be poorer and that the working class are all just greedy buying things and they're bad people? No. Do we believe any of that? No. That said, are there aspects like, planned obsolescence, for example, right? Your iPhone breaks. Apple designed your iPhone to break, so you have to buy another one so they can make more profits. Well, that's bullshit. And that's consumerism, right? I mean, your iPhone shouldn't break. They should make it to last as long as it possibly can. So I mean, we're not against people having stuff. We're against the irrational use of resources in the capitalist system. We would like the economy to be more rationally organized and planned. That's what we would like. But when people talk about consumerism, that's generally a degrowth kind of narrative, a degrowth argument, and that's not the way we see things. But that said, the way marketing goes on, where they create a need, they convince people they need this product they don't really need. They make products break on time. There's aspects of what you might call consumerism that we're against, but the overall narrative that the problem with capitalism is people have stuff and we don't want them to have stuff because that's bad for the environment. That is an anti-communist myth and it has nothing to do with what we believe. All right. How do you see Syria being able to regain control of its oil fields? And where does the revenue go? Well, right now the revenue is going to the United States. I mean, that's Donald Trump. He said, we took their oil. And he just blatantly said it. He said, we went and we took their oil. We took their oil. That's what we did. We took their oil. We took their oil. Okay, there's another Rumble rant that's come in. But how do they get control of it? Well, the international community, now that Syria is back in the Arab League, and I'll do the next Rumble rant from Delta V after this, the international community has to force the United States to recognize the territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic. Now that the whole world is basically saying that the Syrian government is legit. For a while, there was debate about that, but now that is no longer the case. Syria is now represented. It is, recognized by the Arab League, etc. The international community has to come together and tell the United States to get the hell out, right? The Syrian government never told America, the United States, it could have troops in Syria. And so they need to get out of there. And the oil then needs to go back to the Syrian state. But right now, it's not. And the United States is taking their oil. And it's very blatant, right? And Donald Trump said, we're there to get their oil. And that's, you want to talk, it's just a blatant violation of international law. Could you imagine if Russia did this, right? If Russia sent troops into a foreign country and without the permission of that country, sent troops in just to get their oil. And they said, oh, we're doing it to get the oil, right? Not like Ukraine, where they did everything they possibly could to avoid going in, and they were forced to go in, and the regions voted, and no, not like that at all. No, like imagine that Russia just saw some oil somewhere and sent its military, and they asked them, why are you doing it? And they said, oh, well, we want to get their oil. Everyone would be outraged about it. But because the United States is doing it, they get a free pass. The USA has no legal right to maintain any military presence in Syria. But the USA is in Syria because of the fact that it's the United States and it doesn't have to follow the rules. And that's how these things work. So there you go. There you go. All right. Capitalists are Satanists. Thoughts on the Bohemian Grove. Okay, well, Satanism, literal Satanism, is a religion started by a 1960s philosopher named Anton LaVey. And he was a guy who shaved his head, and he was one of these occult guru dudes who, did like devil worship ceremonies and stuff. And he published the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Rituals, and he, did talk shows, and he had a pet lion. He was a former circus performer, and he was just one of these, performers, I guess, in the 1960s. He was a circus act, basically. And 1960s, 1970, they took him around U.S. media. He was bald, and he had a goatee, and he had a deep voice, and he was Anton LaVey, and he had a pet lion, and he was just, he invented his own philosophy that drew heavily from Ayn Rand, and it was called Satanism. And every goth teenager ever buys his book, The Satanic Bible, and that's Satanism. And it's a carnival act. It's a performance act. And it's really, if I would argue anything, it's kind of a cheap knockoff of what Aleister Crowley did. Aleister Crowley was a similar guy who existed like before World War II in like the 20s and 30s. And Aleister Crowley was also, he had roughly the same philosophy. He called it Thelema. And it was the same, to thine own will be true or something like that. I forget what it is, like, to thine own will be true, something like that. And he went around and did weird ceremonies with naked women on altars, and sexual orgies, and and discover your own will and all this stuff. And that was just, Aleister Crowley was quite good at what he did. He cultivated quite a following, being this, I don't know what you want to call him, mystical performer, occult guru, mystic. I don't know what you want to call it. Anton LaVey came in the 1960s, and he was kind of a cheap knockoff of Aleister Crowley. Not as entertaining, not as not as good at what he did, but he used mass media, and he went out of his way to offend religious people, right? Because he's a Satanist. I don't know. That's literal Satanism. Now, you want to talk about the influence of forces of evil in the world? That's a religious conversation you and I can have over coffee sometime, Gabby. We can talk about, the devil and what the devil means and what that means in a religious sense. And is there literally a guy with horns, or is this just a representation of absence from God, like many modern Christians say? Or like, what is the devil? What is Satan? That's like a religious conversation that we can have sometime. Not going to go there on this stream tonight. But as far as the Bohemian Grove, it's the Bohemian Club, right? And the Bohemian Club is one of these exclusive elite resorts in California, and that it's like presidents and heads of corporations. It's a very elite thing to get to join, and they go in the middle of the woods, and they are naked, and it's for men only, and it's like a weird fraternity or something. It's like a fraternity, hazing and weird sacrificial stuff, and it's the center of a lot of conspiracy theories. I don't think it in and of itself is satanic, but it's just like, look, before TV was invented, people tended to join clubs, the Masons, the Elks, the Odd Fellows, the Loyal Order of the Moose, the Lions Club. There's many of these little fraternal associations, and they all had like weird rituals and weird initiation ceremonies and passwords and handshakes, and it was just a thing people did, right? Knights of Columbus was for Roman Catholics, right? A lot of these groups wouldn't allow Catholics to join because they had the right of confessions. They might reveal some of their secrets. And there was just a lot of these clubs. Well, the Bohemian Club is left over from those years, right? And it's one of those clubs, and it's very elite, and people really want to join because they get to hang out and be in the woods and be naked with presidents. And, it's a way to network, get jobs, stuff like that. It's just like joining an elite fraternity or a sorority or something like that. It's just a place to network with very high achieving, successful people. And then part of the reason they are naked and stuff like that, it's kind of a twisted game. And I've noticed this about certain rich people. I've very rarely been around like ultra rich people, but some rich people, they kind of enjoy making people sexually uncomfortable. That's a really weird thing about rich people. I don't understand it at all, but it's like a game they like to play where they make the poor people who are more socially conservative than them uncomfortable, right? And it's a thing that they do, right? It's like the rich kids will like corner the conservative Roman Catholic Latin nanny and try to ask her about her sex life and the size of her husband's penis or something like that, and she'll get really uncomfortable, and then they'll giggle about like, oh, ha ha ha. Well, that's called sexual harassment. That's what that is. It's very evil. But there's an aspect of that with rich people. Rich people kind of enjoy sexually harassing and making poor people uncomfortable. It's really a sick thing that rich people like to do. And so the Bohemian Grove, the fact that all the men are there naked and all of that, that's the idea, right? Is that, the presidents are all in this club, right? They're all in this club and all of that. And so all these people want to join it, but then in order to join, we get to sexually embarrass you. We get to make you be naked in front of everybody. We might have some ritual that involves, touching your body parts or something like that, right? And it's like, okay, well, we're so elite, we're so special that you really want to join our club, right? So you have to let us sexually humiliate you. It's a really kind of a nasty, nasty thing, right? And there's stuff like this all throughout U.S. society, right? When they talk about, fraternity hazing, sorority hazing rituals, and I mean, there's a lot of weird shit like this that goes on. Now, in the age of cancel culture, and there's a lot more awareness about things like sexual abuse and things like that. Because of that, people don't get away with this kind of stuff in the same way that they used to. But a lot of times, especially among rich people who have a lot of free time, right? They don't have a job. They're supporting themselves. There's a lot of, how can we make poor people uncomfortable? How can we sexually embarrass? How can we get people into a position where they want our money so bad that they have to sexually embarrass themselves? It's like rich kid bullying kind of behavior. And you see that with a lot of these fraternal organizations. Here's what Richard Nixon had to say about the Bohemian Grove. This is Richard Nixon, and he's on the Nixon tapes talking about the Bohemian Grove. If I can get it to come up. Hold on. Oh, here it is. Nixon on the Bohemian Grove.
As spring began to bloom in Washington, D.C., President Nixon took the time to have an impromptu conversation with two of his close aides. H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman were known by Nixon staffers as the Berlin Wall because of their German-sounding names and their penchant for isolating Nixon from anyone who wanted to see him. The only problem was, this little off-the-cuff conversation was being recorded by the secret White House taping system, and President Nixon's thoughts, as well as those of Haldeman and Ehrlichman, would soon become a part of presidential history.
Let's look at Northern California. You understand? Yeah. You know what's happened in San Francisco. San Francisco just gone. It's clear over. I know that, but it isn't just down in the ratty part of town. But the upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove that I attend on time to time, the Easterners and the others that come there. But it is the most faggy goddamn thing you will ever imagine. The San Francisco crowd that goes in there. It's just terrible. I mean, I don't want to shake hands with anybody in San Francisco. Really? Well, it's a different set of values.
So there you go. That is Richard Nixon's thoughts on the Bohemian Grove. There you go. I mean, what more is there to say about it? What more is there to say about it? He pretty well summed it up. So, here's the Rumble rant. I think it's interesting that YouTube will never recommend any of your videos, but it recommends Chris Hedges all the time. Somehow he is acceptable for YouTube's algorithm. Hey, I don't know what that's about. Chris Hedges is a nice guy. I worked with him around the office at RT, New York City. He would film his show in the office. He was a great, very friendly man. We had many good conversations about politics and world events. Obviously, we have very, very different views. But he's very critical of the U.S. power structure, and so am I. And, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I worked with him. I was in the same office as him. I joked with him. I gave him advice about what ties to wear. One time he was asking me about ties and stuff, so whatever, you got to just roll with the punches, as they say. He spoke at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, right? I got to tell you, that in and of itself puts Chris Hedges head and shoulders above many other folks, right? He actually, despite all the cancel culture and all the smearing and all the feces that were thrown at Rage Against the War Machine, it was a right-wing terrorist he spoke at it. He went there and he got on that stage, and as Chris Hedges, he spoke to the Rage Against the War Machine rally. That is highly admirable. I give him points for that. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And there was a huge amount of pressure put on him and everybody else, every other big name, not to go there. He spoke at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. So good for him, right? That wins respect in my book. But yeah, we have vastly different views of the world and of philosophy and things like that. He's not where I'm at, but, I mean, generally working with him in the office was pretty good, and, I'm still friends with the woman who is his producer, very nice woman, who, I sometimes will coordinate with, help her find guests for shows and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, no hard feelings. Yeah, I mean, I just, look, we all need to learn the art of being professional, that if you're in a space with somebody that you don't agree with or somebody that you've clashed with in the past, but you have a job to do, be professional, right? That's a really important thing, right? You can't be an activist in every circumstance in life, and if you're gonna take this seriously, sometimes you have to learn to be able to just get along and occupy the same space as somebody who you might disagree with on a number of issues. So there you go. I hope that answers your question, Delta V. I hope that was helpful. All right, folks, I am going to be back tonight. I'm going to be back probably around 10 p.m., maybe a little bit later than that, maybe 10:30. But yeah, I'll be back tonight after it's dark, right? I'm just trying to stream as much as I can before I head out of the country, because I'm heading out of the country late Monday night, it looks like. So wish me luck, and I'll be back. See you all tonight. I'm going to put on the closing music. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.